Hi, my name is Sam Supan. I'm a senior here at Rhodes College. I work in the GIS lab. Today I'll be presenting my map, mapping toxic release sites in Southwest Memphis, making that an accessible approach. The purpose of this interactive map is to build off of the work previously done by the Memphis Community Against Pollution, MCAP, as well as the Southern Environmental Law Center. The map represents a first step to be used as an accessible tool for community members, residents of Southwest Memphis, environmental justice groups, and policymakers at the local and state level. Visual tools are often easier to understand, so we wanted to create a map where toxic release inventory sites are mapped in relation to demographic data, where residents are residing as well as gathering in the community, and that map would then have data on the chemical emissions from these sites as well as air pollution. So firstly, what is a TRI site? A TRI site stands for Toxic Release Inventory Site. These are sites tracked by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and they are required to report all of their releases, waste transfers, the chemical type, quantity, location, and storage of these toxic chemicals to state and local officials. They've been designated a TRI site because they're using toxic chemicals in their manufacturing process or as an output, and these have been shown to pose a threat to human health and the environment. This is a map of Shelby County. As you can see, TRI sites are denoted by the dots. There are 58 total located within Shelby County. We used 2023 data for all of this as it was the most recent data point that we could get in its entirety. So in 2023, there were 58 total. 25 of those, which is almost half, were located in the region of Southwest Memphis. So we can see here the disproportionate distribution of these sites. For the purposes of this map, what we're denoting as Southwest Memphis is characterized by the zip codes 38106, 38109, 38126, and 38113. I've placed the census tracts over these zip codes for this map here on the screen, and I wanted to highlight in gray that the entirety of 38113 and about half of 38109 are denoted as non-residential and that no one lives here. The majority of the TRI sites we'll discuss later are in this area. Whether that's true, though, is potentially up for debate. The U.S. Census Bureau only categorizes residential areas if traditional residences are held, and so if residents are living in non-traditional homes or are unhoused at the time, this may potentially not be counted in the Census Bureau data. These maps showcase demographic data for Southwest Memphis. The census tracts here are primarily Black, as well as having high rates of vacancy relative to Shelby County, which is typically around 10 to 12%. This data is coming from the American Community Survey from 2019 to 2023, so this data is over 5 years, and I wanted to discuss why TRI sites might be incentivized to place their factories, their chemical plants in these areas. One is the history of NIMBYism, or not in my backyard. White rich neighborhoods generally do not want to see something industrial that's going to be emitting high amounts of hazardous chemicals in their backyard, but they're fine if it ends up down in Boxtown or somewhere similar. Industrial companies often usually receive tax breaks for putting their plants in lower income areas in an effort to kind of incentivize the community. We know that's not often the case that actually happens, but they do receive tax breaks. Also, the general cost of land to put up a factory is cheaper in areas like Southwest Memphis. Almost all of the TRI sites that are depicted on the map release hazardous air pollutants, also called HAPs. Studies done in the early 2010s found that 100% of air samples that were collected in Southwest Memphis contained propylene, all aromatic compounds, as well as chlorofluorocarbons. I wanted to note that because those are actually ozone depleting compounds. About 90% of samples contain things like benzene, ethylbenzene, xylene, And studies in health impacts have found that benzene and formaldehyde in particular are known as risk drivers for the cumulative cancer rate. Benzene with about 43% and formaldehyde with 19%. That data is important because the cumulative cancer risk in Southwest Memphis is about 1 in 2,400, or 4 times higher than the national average. This has been directly linked to the industrial complex that's been set up in Southwest Memphis, and other health impacts have also been found here. There are statistically significant spatiotemporal clusters of childhood asthma. The childhood asthma rate in Southwest Memphis is much higher than elsewhere. Also, I wanted to note the case study of the Sterilization Services of Tennessee. This was a TRI facility that had been operating since the 1970s, producing tons of ethylene oxide in air pollution. And ethylene oxide has been linked to lymphoma and breast cancer as a carcinogen. And recent studies, there's one that came out last year in 2024, have found higher rates of breast cancer and an inequality in the distribution in Southwest Memphis of African American women with breast cancer with no family history of the BRCA gene or something similar. All of that to say, it was very important for us to make this map. Data was sourced from the Memphis Data Hub for community levels data. The Census Bureau was sourced to get demographic data for these census tracts. TRI site data came from the EPA's TRI tracker website, and I was able to get the top 5 chemicals emitted from each plant, as well as air pollution in pounds in total from 2023. For the methods, I clipped all of the layers to the relevant geographic area, projected them all into the State Plane Tennessee coordinate system, and then exported all of the layers from ArcGIS Pro to ArcGIS Online and then into the Experience Builder tool so that I was able to start adding that interactivity component that's so important for the approachable access to this map. When the map opens, this is what users are greeted with. The map here represents Southwest Memphis, and all of the TRI sites are located in this black and red. Parks are denoted by the trees, schools in the purple, community centers in this blue triangle. Those represent community gathering points to allow residents to recognize areas when they're looking at the map. On the side to this bottom right, users are able to toggle the visibility of different layers. So, for example, the XAI site is currently just drawn in because I used 2023 data for this, and so it is not yet registered as a TRI site. Census tracts can be toggled here, as well as demographic data that I mentioned earlier. So demographics, pressing this arrow allows one to toggle the percent of the population that is Black, percent of the population with a high school diploma. The legend populates to this left side here. Percent of household that lacks complete plumbing, percent of households that are vacant, and median household income. All of those are important social determinants of health and also help to characterize the area. One is able to also toggle on the left-hand side the base map. So if you wanted to look at satellite data, you can click on imagery and that will populate and one can zoom in. I'm going to switch it back to topographic for the ease of visibility. One interesting tool is that you can, on the side here, select a chemical and then it will filter by the TRI sites that utilize that chemical. So if I wanted to see 2,4-DB, I can see that these two utilize it. If I click on the site, it will populate with the name of the facility. For example, I'm going to use ammonia. I know multiple sites utilize that. And then if I click down here and toggle on the chemical emissions, now I have the list of all of the TRI sites that produce ammonia or did in 2023, and I can sort this by the pounds that are being produced. And this is all what they've self-reported, but ammonia, all of the sites here, all of the chemicals here are hazardous air pollutants. Then I can clear the selection. I can also search for a chemical if I wanted to there. But one interesting feature is that the default is to create a 1 mile buffer. So if I wanted to go to a specific area, if I was a resident and I wanted to put in my home, I could do that. For the purposes of this, I'll be using Roosevelt Park, and it will auto zoom to that location, and it will show me the amount of TRI sites within that 1 mile buffer. So then I can click over here and it will show me the site as well as the distance, and it will highlight it on the map. Again, that's a 1 mile buffer. Instead, if I wanted to, let's say, use 2 or however big I wanted to make that buffer, and I wanted to place the location myself, I can utilize this pin tool and I can go to wherever I'd like. Let's say I wanted to do the XAI site. I can put that there and I can see how many TRI sites are within that buffer. I can see there's 3 here and I can see their names and the location. And when I clear that, again, I have access to this map. If I go over to total air pollution, then I see a map of the total air pollution in Southwest Memphis, again for 2023. So these are denoted by size of the TRI site. So I can see here that I believe this is the Valero Refining Company, produces the most at almost 150,000 tons of air pollution. The map is a work in progress. It is still being developed. There are some kinks that still need to be worked out, but it's a good first tool for utilizing this for community members. Future goals for this project include continuing to add interactivity features to the map. Eventually, we'd like to be able to have health impact data or links to alternative sites populate. There's also some kinks that need to be worked out. This is, like I said, a work in progress. It's continuing to be developed. I am graduating this year, so I will be training members of our research team to continue this as the years go by and as the situation develops in Southwest Memphis. We'd also like to eventually have real air pollution data that can be used to corroborate the data on the map. So that's a future goal as well. Health impact data is difficult to find at the census tract level. It is usually sourced from individual studies, but again, we'd like that data to be readily available for residents. This slide comes from the XAI site proposed permit. These screenshots represent what they've reported as the facility-wide maximum over a year at that rolling emissions rate. So they've stated that 26,000 pounds will be the max that can be produced of hazardous air pollutants from this facility. And then I'd like to draw your attention to the formaldehyde number, which will be almost 20,000 pounds. Formaldehyde, I commented on earlier, is a direct link to the cancer risk rate increase. And as we know, Southwest Memphis already deals with a lot of air pollution, lots of different sites that are polluting the area. So the XAI site has the potential to increase those numbers. This is also what they're reporting. There's potential for it to be much larger, especially as they continue to expand or develop. Here is the works cited I utilized for this project. And here is a big thank you to everyone who contributed to this work.